Welcome to my podcast on corporate digital responsibility. Corporate digital responsibility outlines a set of responsibilities that any organisation should consider in helping to achieve a better balance of the utilisation of digital technologies for the benefit of all in society. It is a recognition that the organisations driving forward the advancement of technology and those that leverage technology to engage and provide services to the citizen have a responsibility to do so in a manner that is fundamentally leading us towards a positive future. Okay, so welcome to episode 2 of the podcast series on corporate digital responsibility, and I'm delighted to welcome Christopher Joynson, who's going to talk to us about his new article, COVID-19, a litmus test for digital inclusion. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I've been meaning to write this blog for a while. It's something I'm really interested in. So a bit about me. I work for Atos Consulting in the UK. I've done so for about 5 years and have in some of that time been working closely with Rob in helping develop some of our thinking around corporate digital responsibility. For me, my passion for the topic comes from the topic of digital inclusion, and you'll see that in the blog about how we ensure that all of society gets the same opportunity and feels the same comfort level towards the technology that I love to use on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent, thank you. And I think the plan is that we'll read the blog, or you'll read your blog out, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A after that so that we can discuss some of the points that are in that. So over to you, and we'll catch up later in the podcast.
Perfect.
COVID-19, a litmus test for digital inclusion. Digital technology has been a key component of the effort to tackle the COVID-19 virus and support the new ways of living and working reality imposed upon us during this exceptional time. Technology has helped us build new hospitals at scale faster than ever before, enabled our economy to depend upon contactless payments, and our workplaces to become fully virtual. In the words of the European Commission, digital technologies have never been more important in our lives. This has truly put to the test how comfortable we feel with technology and its invasive role in our day-to-day lives, when it is for the good of ourselves and the people around us. A matter of life and death. In our digital inclusion survey, published in October 2017, we learned that people, particularly older generations, comparatively are more comfortable with technologies that have some benefit for their health. Indeed, we found that people were more comfortable with having nanobots to fight disease injected into their bloodstream than having a Google Home or Alexa device in their bedroom. This led to a hypothesis that beneficial health impacts can have a far greater impact than other factors on how willing we are to embrace new technologies. This hypothesis has really been put to the test by the COVID-19 app. Gabby Appleton, the Director of Product for Test and Trace, says that since its launch on the 24th of September, the NHS COVID-19 app has been downloaded by more than 19 million people in England and Wales. That's around 40% of eligible adults and more than any other European country. Yet within that 40% of eligible adults, and outside in the rest of society, there is a whole mix of perspectives, understandings and capabilities at play. The app has a privacy notice that is 5,514 words long and uses the phrase personal data 19 times. It makes every effort to reassure the user that it uses the minimum amount of your personal data. But in doing so, it is referencing concepts and using language that a large part of our society have different perceptions of, or quite simply don't understand. This government app, put in place to save our lives, is asking us to take a leap of faith into the unknown and be comfortable with that leap. 19 million people have felt comfortable with downloading the app. Many will have downloaded the app without realising what the app is actually doing. The rest of the population are a blend of people who refuse to take the risk, haven't been persuaded by its value, or don't know how to download an app, or don't have the device capable of doing so. Did you take the leap and download the app? Why this matters. In this emerging world, where digital technologies have never been more important in our lives, it is not good enough to leave people behind and have them excluded from technology capabilities that could save their lives. Corporate digital responsibility is a concept that seeks to warn against these digital inclusion issues and the integration of technology into our lives. It seeks to find the balance between technological progression and our ethics, conscience, and trust. In many senses, CDR is about protecting against a new form of vulnerability in our society. The vulnerability of feeling excluded from life-saving technology, being exposed to hacking events, having your privacy threatened, and more threats derived from the digital world. We must get digital inclusion right in cases such as the COVID-19 app, if we are ever to embark on new progressive campaigns for concepts such as online voting and a digital identity. If we can do so properly, this will be the clearest indicator yet that corporate digital responsibility is protecting the most vulnerable in our society.
Okay, so great article, Christopher, and thank you for that. Just a few questions for me, really. Well, let's start with, one of the things that we've talked about a number of times is that people during the pandemic have adopted digital solutions because they really haven't had any choice. They've had to book shopping online in supermarkets, they've had to do their banking online or retailing, even see their doctor online. And these are new things for many people. They've not done that previously. Which do you think will stick after the pandemic, and maybe kind of where do you think people will perhaps go back to the ways of working that they had before?
Honestly, I think predominantly people will not revert to the previous way of behaving and their previous attitudes towards technology. And the reason I say that is that I believe for a lot of people, it's the first use, it's the first engagement with that technology that forms the barrier. It's the actual concept of, I don't do online banking, that's just not me. I much prefer to go into my branch and speak to a human. And yet that first attempt, that first successful transmission of funds into your account online from the comfort of your home, you know what's going on and you feel secure about it. After all of this pandemic has eased and we have less of the restrictions in place, I honestly don't think people will all of a sudden decide to go into the shops to do so. I think people have access to do it and they might choose to, but a lot of those behaviours will retain themselves in the future world, which I think is really positive.
I think one of the things that we saw in the work that we did before was that digital services, one of the advantages for people was the immediacy, the convenience of it. I guess one area that might persuade people to go back into those environments is the social aspect of it, especially after having been locked in for so long in terms of kind of not seeing people as they would have done before.
Yeah, and for example, I think I've spoken to my gran more over the past few months than I would have done outside of the pandemic, because obviously there's a driver to do so, to engage with people and to be engaged, but also I'm now able to speak to her through video conferencing. So I think that social element is one of the real drivers for people to enjoy this new digital world. If you remember, as part of my original presentation that we worked on together, we had the story of a YouTuber who started their YouTube career at the age of 75, I think it was, and had gone on to speak to people all over the world about what he does and what he's interested in. That's an extreme example, but a good one of how once you get over that feeling of, oh, social media isn't for me, once you do it in a way that you feel comfortable with, it can really lead to growth in the area.
Excellent. So we've talked again around through the pandemic, it's accelerated adoption, and that people have had to have done that. Do you think the burning need of having to do something has maybe trumped any privacy concerns that people may have otherwise had. They haven't had a choice, so they've not really had time to worry.
I think so. And I was reading through earlier today some of the comment sections on the articles you see on these websites talking about the new NHS COVID app. And people aren't talking about privacy, or they're not talking about those kind of technology concerns. They're talking about the fundamentals of, do I need an app to download this? If it did tell me to isolate for a period of time, would I do so? Because fundamentally the app doesn't know who you are and can't tell the authorities that they've told you personally to isolate. So would I bother, and therefore should I download the app? There's some of those concerns that are dominating the conversation. And therefore, I think privacy is way at the back of people's minds. Now, should it be? I suppose is the question there. Should people be more concerned about what they are signing up to when they go on these apps, when they buy something on iTunes and sign up to something? Should this be more concern, or are we just trying to sleepwalk into a naive world where people just sign up to these digital apps and capabilities without really thinking about that side of things until a hack occurs or until something occurs that they didn't expect? I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but no, I think that the driver for the app is at this point much more fundamental than the privacy concern. Is that a good thing? I'm not sure.
And I think in the article itself, you talk about, for example, the amount of words in the privacy policy and question just how many people will have actually read that. I guess your point is it's one thing to make sure that there is a better inclusion and accessibility to services and technology that enables people to do things in a more effective way for the benefit of themselves or for society. But there is this wider piece around how do you actually raise awareness of what is happening to their personal data, or what others can determine about that individual and how that might be used. So then there's this secondary challenge of kind of making sure that people are aware of the privacy issues, aware of the security concerns, but not sufficiently such that it puts them off engaging in the first place and therefore losing out on the benefit.
Indeed, I think the purpose of a privacy policy fundamentally is a contractual arrangement that you sign up to when downloading an app. It is not what perhaps some companies are considering to be, there to reassure people that downloading the app is the right thing to do. And perhaps in this example of the NHS COVID app, that thing that people tick at the bottom to say, yes, I'm comfortable. They've put all of their focus on making sure people feel happy in that privacy policy, which I doubt many people will read. So I think actually we need to focus much more on that gut instinct feel of the population. Am I happy to engage with this technology, or am I fundamentally unhappy to do so? And challenge that at the front end. I don't think that's got anything to do with the privacy policy that you sign up to at the end.
It's almost
a challenge.
Almost saying that kind of there's two versions of a privacy policy. It's kind of there's the legalese, and then there's the piece that's actually the accessible and easy to read, kind of what it means for me version of that. But let's move on. So we've seen a lot of statistics that people have talked about, or the media have talked about, in terms of increased numbers of the population globally, and certainly in the UK moving into poverty. What about in digital inclusion in terms of? I don't think anyone would argue that it's right. It's the right thing to ensure that as many people as possible are able to access products and services, applications that enable them to improve their lot. But is there also a kind of point there about, and in doing so, there's commercial value or economic value that then enables the country to bounce back?
Certainly, I think it's a bit of a a crux point for that topic, given that the pandemic will naturally have moved a lot of companies over to digital means of engagement with their customers. So if you think about the retail sector, for example, and food sector, they're going to be spending a lot more time delivering to homes, and they will probably be engaging their customers using an app platform. So in that respect, a lot of our economy's retail infrastructure will shift into the digital world, shift us towards that digital economy. And at that point, the amount of people feeling comfortable using this technology and engaging with it as a part of their day-to-day activity is tantamount to the amount of people walking through your shop door. And therefore, yes, I actually think that digital inclusion might play a really fundamental element in the future of our economy. And if the COVID-19 pandemic is sought to accelerate digital inclusion, then in doing so, it will have enabled us to bounce back in the post economy and drive us towards one where people are much more comfortable consuming elements in the future world.
Again, in the article, you talked about CDR and protecting against vulnerability, and certainly, kind of, we've seen that the virus has hit hardest those most vulnerable in our society, whether through health or poverty. What did you mean by that point?
I think it was really a reflection on the work that we've done together and the work we've been learning that others have done as well. And there's often a phrase used, which is CDR is kind of the progression of technology for the good of society and the good of us all, and to move us towards a positive future. But when we refer to us all, we're probably actually referring to that portion of society that might feel excluded or might be at most risk of the challenges and threats that the digital world creates, whether that be that impressionable young person who might be persuaded by fake news, or whether it be that person who's more willing to click on a hacking email, or somebody who feels excluded by technology altogether and won't download a potentially life-saving app onto their app as a result. So for me, CDR is starting to almost build a new vulnerability concept in our society, vulnerable to these technology factors. And going forward, those people most vulnerable might need to be most at the forefront of our thinking. And perhaps that's a new perspective and lens on how this progresses going forward.
Okay, and one of the things that we looked at before was just how people felt about these technologies, and you mentioned in the article the I guess the kind of one that we talked about time and time again in terms of how people felt about nanobots in their bloodstream, which of course, as far as we were aware, hadn't happened yet, versus voice assistants in the home, which had. I wonder how kind of the survey would report back today, how the world would think about technology now in the questions that we asked. Any thoughts there?
I think it's a really interesting point, and I'd love to put that to the test. Of course, it's very difficult for us to actually guess, because we shouldn't forget that survey covered personas from all over the world of all different age groups, people from Asia, America, Europe, people between 11 and 19, and people between 50 and 59. So there's such a diverse perspective. You'd have to expect that as we progress and we move, get more familiar with these technology concepts, that people would feel more comfortable. And perhaps that wave of comfort that we drew up, that picture of those things where people feel more or less comfortable with a product, will shift to the right, and there will be a new wave of things that actually people feel much more comfortable with, and a new wave of things that people feel much less comfortable with that we're now aware of now. What's the next dystopian thing that we're unsure about? So yes, that's my view. It's difficult to tell, but we must expect it to be showing more comfort on the whole.
Maybe something to do again post the pandemic, to
Maybe.
check in with the world, how they feel. Okay, so that's great. Thank you very much for your thoughts on CDR in the context, especially of digital inclusion and accessibility, but also talking about some of the issues around kind of data use as well, and clearly all key parts of corporate digital responsibility in the work that we have done over the past few years. And look forward to the next episode in this podcast series in the next week or two. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.